Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this video I'd like to share with you the entire process of creating a piece of art from start to finish. In this particular video, I'm going to share with you a time lapse that was taken from 7 recorded live lessons, which are part of our membership program at thevirtualinstructor.com. In this lesson series, we create a pastel landscape of some birch trees, a wooded landscape, with Rembrandt pastels on Canson Hunt's pastel paper. And I'm going to walk you through the entire process here in this time-lapse video, but if you want to see the real-time instruction and follow along with the entire process, then you do have to be a member at thevirtualinstructor.com. Our membership program features a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subject matter and media, weekly live lessons, weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. If you want to learn more about our program, you can click on the link in the description below. You can start your free trial, of course, or if you want to get your feet wet and just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so as well. I'll leave a link in the description below. All right, with that being said, here's a look at the time lapse and the entire process of creating this piece of art. Now you can see here, I started off here working on the Canson Hunt's pastel paper. This paper features 2 distinct sides. I decided to work on the heavily textured side because I knew that I was going to be applying lots of layers of the soft pastel to the surface. I started simply with a white pastel pencil, trying to figure out where these trees were located, and they were pretty confusing. There was lots of overlapping that happened, especially on the right side of the picture plane. From there, I decided to go ahead and start filling out where I saw the darkest values. I did so with a black. Now, typically I'll mix a black by combining a dark blue and a dark brown, but in this particular case, I decided to go ahead and use black pretty liberally throughout the process. Once I had some of the shadows in place, I started at the top part of the picture plane applying colors. And the approach I took with this particular series is just grabbing colors as I saw them and adding them to the surface. I coined this the grab and go technique. And every pastel that I pulled out, I kept out and available to me so that I knew that I had used it, which gave me permission to use it in another location within the picture plane. You can see here there's lots of layers applied in the upper left-hand corner. In fact, there's lots of layers applied throughout this entire painting, and it's very important when you're working with a medium like this to apply lots of layers. The layers build up the depth in the color and eventually add to realism. This, of course, requires quite a bit of patience. So in order to be successful with a medium like this, you do have to be patient, even though you do get some level of instant gratification by applying the material directly to the surface. But the magic in mixing with pastels all comes in the form of layering. And as we go through this process, you'll notice how these seemingly detailless shapes of color and value eventually evolve into a detailed pastel painting. The light source in this scene is originating from behind the trees and mainly coming from the upper left-hand corner. This is producing those really interesting shadows in the foreground, which we address later in the process. But there are hints of the light that's filtering through, and we can see this clearly on the left side of each one of these tree trunks, where we have these wonderful highlights, which was one of my favorite parts of the process, is adding those highlights. There was a lot of complexity in these trees, obviously, and again, to build up the complexity in the drawing, it all comes down to layering. So you can see I'm using lots and lots of different layers of different grays. There's also some blacks in there as well, and some hints of blue. And you'll notice here, if you've got a good eye, that I'm adding bits of purple as well. Now, the purple is added because I'm trying to exploit somewhat of a secondary color scheme. We see oranges and greens in here clearly, but if I can bring out a little bit of purple, I can create additional contrast within the scene and keep it within a harmonious color scheme. Secondary colors, of course, are equidistant from each other on the color wheel. They form a color triad, and that's why I decided to add hints of purple here and there, although that purple might not be obvious in the photo reference. So you can see I'm working my way from the upper left-hand corner and basically working my way down to the lower part of the picture plane, working my way to the right side of the picture plane. I'm working in this manner simply because, for a couple of reasons, really. One, I'm right-handed, so I'm trying to keep the palm of my hand out of the way, and a good way to do that is to work from left to right. But also when you're working with a landscape like this and you're using a medium that is somewhat opaque, for example, oils and acrylics are opaque painting mediums, and pastels can be approached in the same way. This means that we can apply colors over the top of areas where we've already applied colors. This gives us permission, in this particular case, to work from the background to the foreground. So I'm basically working from the top part of the picture plane down to the middle, and then finally the lower part of the picture plane or the foreground. You can imagine how difficult it would be to work around the elements in the foreground to add information in the background. So it just makes sense to start with the background and overlap your applications as you work to the foreground. Now, as we're over here on the right side of the picture plane, you can see I've somewhat figured out where these trees are going to be located, and I did some editing as I worked through this process as well. What I mean by this is, instead of following the photo reference exactly, I decided to alter the trees on the right side of the picture plane and alter some of the trees on the left side of the picture plane as well, just so it made a little bit more sense with a drawing/painting. Sometimes we see things in a photo reference, and when we try to include them in a drawing or painting, they just don't translate very well, and I felt like I was going to run into that issue with these trees. So there's a little bit of a difference between what I did on the right side of the picture plane with what we see in the photo reference. Now here in the foreground, or as I'm working to the foreground, you can see all that wonderful bits of light, or those wonderful bits of light that are shining through the canopy of trees. And this is producing, of course, some much lighter values in some of these areas, but also some really dark, rich shadows. And I really liked how those darker shadows were bumping up against some of those lighter highlights, of course, creating that illusion of light within the scene. You'll also notice that I decided to alter the direction of the path, a little bit more of that editing there. I felt like by moving the path closer to the middle of the picture plane with maybe a slight bend was a little bit better compositionally and helped to pull a viewer's eye into the center portion of the piece a little bit better than what we saw in the photo reference. Now, of course, the strokes you make with a pastel drawing are very important, and in this particular case, I tried to create a lot of rhythm with the stroke making, and I also tried on the left side of the picture plane, you can see those kind of taller grasses there. I tried to make marks so that it helped to pull the viewer's eye back down the path, so you can see those marks kind of curve around a little bit. And on the right side of the path, I tried to make those marks go a little bit more diagonal, to help pull the viewer's eye towards the path, or at least down the path. So my goal here was to hopefully pull a viewer's eye into the piece via the path, and then up through the piece along the tree branches and the tree trunks and so on. So you can see I've added a few leaves here and there in the foreground. I backed off of them a little bit to try to keep the drawing from becoming too busy, but I also wanted to bump up a lot of that strong contrast in the foreground as well. So I made the shadows a little bit stronger, especially in the right lower portion of the picture plane. I also made the highlights a little bit stronger there as well. And then once we had covered the entire picture plane, I was happy with the piece. Our pastel landscape of some birch trees was complete. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're able to pick up a couple of things here and there. Remember, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe and click on that notification bell so you're notified when we upload new videos. And I'll remind you, if you want to check out our membership program, there's a link in the description below. And if you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, again, there's a link in the description below. Thanks again for watching. And as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.